So what happens when you have a lot of material between your foot and the ground, whether it's cushion or the air from an Air Max, is you are creating this sensory disconnect between the nerves and the surface, and then really the stimulation that's coming in from the ground to your nervous system. An important concept that ties into this is that every time we strike the ground, we are experiencing ground reaction forces, and those ground reaction forces are perceived as vibration. So vibration is a extremely powerful stimulus that comes into your feet and into your nervous system. As soon as you put cushion, Air Max material between the foot and the ground, it is actually absorbing the vibration. And we use vibration to build bone density, to stimulate the loading response, to actually force your intrinsic muscles of your foot to contract. So there's a lot of sensory, neuromuscular, motor responses that are built off of sensory input. And if you're not getting sensory input, you are moving in this very disconnected way. Or I often say that your body is moving without all of the pieces to the puzzle, right? Like you'll find a way to move, but are you moving as optimally or as efficiently as you could be? And with the athletes, this is huge because you're talking about like the 1%, right? You need the millisecond, and cushion in footwear or tapping into the sensory side of the foot could be where that millisecond is lying.
And then so with that, kind of working our way up the chain, one of the things you discuss in your book, Barefoot Strong, is about how the foot is coupled to movements going up in the knee and the hip. And, one of the things that we see, we work with a lot of volleyball players, and, a few years ago, someone's knees went into valgus. I think people called the police and everybody panicked and everything happened. And now it's starting to move away from that a little bit. Can you discuss how, or the connection between your foot, the ground, and then working up the chain?
Yeah, so kinematically, which is the joint coupling that you're describing, every time your foot moves, and if the listeners want to stand up and kind of go through this with me, they totally can. But if you're standing and you roll your feet to the outside, which means you're inverting or supinating, right? And then you roll your foot to the inside, or you're everting and pronating, and you kind of go back and forth, you will see or feel that the knees are going in, this valgus that you were referencing. So the knees coming in is because the tibia was rotating in, and that was associated with the eversion or pronation of the foot. This continues all the way up the chain, that you're going to get rotation of the femur, the pelvis is going to rock forward. Technically, that goes all the way up into spinal and T-spine rotation as well. And we go back and forth. So if we go into the inversion supination, everything kind of externally rotates. The pelvis goes into a posterior tilt, and then it unlocks the pelvis in a different way. This interconnected joint coupling is how you transfer energy. It's also how you optimize mechanical patterns for power and force production. That's one aspect of feet and foot function that I think is the most focused on. And then I always, again, not to keep tying it back to sensory, but then that's why I would add in a layer of sensory on top of that. And like the fascial lines and the perception of the body through the stimulus of the fascia is kind of woven on top of mechanics. I try to not just look at mechanics, but adding in this layer on top. Or maybe it's like one's the cake, this is the icing. Or one's the foundation, the rest is the scaffolding within the body.
That makes a lot of sense. Would you say, or have you noticed that in more elastically driven athletes, I think of Giannis Antetokounmpo, I think is how you say his name, but he's a basketball player, right? Picture of him at the free throw line shooting, and his knees are just basically going towards each other. He's also 6'11", but he's also one of the best athletes in the NBA. Do you find in more elastically driven athletes that you see more of that valgus in the knees, or do you see more of that rotation through the foot? Is that something that's connected?
You definitely can. So I would say the extreme form of high elasticity or connective tissue elasticity would be in like Ehlers-Danlos. So I actually treat people who have connective tissue disorders. This is also like contortionists who have extreme flexibility actually have a form of connective tissue disorder. Now, from the rubber band effect, right, he's really optimizing the energy transfer demands of the fascial and the tendon system within the body. And the way that you load that is, you have to go down to go up. You have to flex to extend. And I think when you see, especially on like slow motion camera or high speed cameras, you're seeing what the naked eye isn't able to see. And there's probably a lot more deviations into these improper positions, like the knee valgus that you referenced, that people would be like, oh my God. But it's the only way that they're able to harness that energy. I know there's slow motion videos of high jumpers and pole vaulters that you can see on YouTube about the foot, and they're completely just like bottoming out their arch compression into their posterior tibialis and their plantar fascia. And at first glance, if you look at that, you're just like, how are they not rupturing that tissue or, tearing things or injuring themselves? But the connective tissue has those properties within it, right? And it's really just the physics of energy transfer.
Yeah, that's something that I was always interested in. Again, like a few years ago, it was, when I was learning, it was always, always have this perfect joint